So I think this is something that a lot of gamers misunderstand. It's not a matter of whether your criticism is valid, it's a matter of whether it's productive. Valid implies that there's some criticism that is invalid, right? But really, all criticism is opinion, and you can have whatever opinion you have. If you don't like frame rate or graphics or gameplay or whatever for any game, you're entitled to your opinion. So it's not a matter of whether or not a criticism is valid. It's a matter of whether or not a criticism will actually affect any sort of change in game development in the gaming industry in general. The reason why the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet criticism was so frustrating as someone who's worked in the industry before is because there was something that could be done, there was a discussion that could be had, and fans were unwilling to have that discussion. Fans said, oh, the whole map was loaded at once, this is just poor programming. But that was wrong. People went into the source code and saw it was not the case. Fans went, oh, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 looks great, so why does Pokemon look bad? And then people went into the code and saw how many polygons Xenoblade Chronicles and Pokemon were actually trying to render at the same time, and Pokemon was rendering magnitudes more. And this happened specifically because Pokemon were prioritized to render in the distance to see if you wanted to catch them, whereas Xenoblade enemies rendered in a lot closer to you. And whenever any creator, not just me, any creator tried to explain that, fans got very upset and said, all I need to do is say the game's bad, it's not my responsibility. But that's kind of anti-intellectualism, right? It's proudly saying, I don't know how this works, and I shouldn't have to. But the problem is, if you don't know how it works, you're an uninformed consumer, and if you're an uninformed consumer, game developers don't listen to you. Pokemon fans screamed, just optimize the game better. Just optimize the game better. Just optimize the game better. Like that was going to fix things. People who worked in the game industry said, actually, that's not how it works. To be able to optimize in this way, there are gameplay elements that are going to have to be given up. And sure enough, the game's been out for a year, and of course, this optimize better isn't happening. You think if it was that easy, they'd definitely do it. Heck, they might charge for it and make some money, but no, they're not doing it because it's not that easy. Furthermore, it obviously doesn't affect their sales. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet broke sales records. When there are a bunch of uninformed fans making false claims about a game and that game still sells well, that is the perfect formula for a game developer to not listen to you. Now, the discussions we could have been having were things like, what elements of gameplay could you get rid of to prioritize performance? Do you really need to see Pokemon at such a draw distance? Is the game actually better if it's not open world, maybe open zone, maybe something else? If performance is a priority, what do we give up for performance? Tears of the Kingdom is a great example. It uses a whole bunch of tricks to keep itself running properly. A lot of those tricks mean there's a maximum amount of items that could be on the screen at one time. That's why there were maximum counts for the item dupe glitch. A lot of those tricks mean there was a maximum amount of enemies you could fight. A lot of those tricks mean reducing things that are in the distance to only a couple pixels and allowing you to identify them via color rather than shape. And we could do that with Pokemon, but would you be upset if you looked into the distance and saw a speck of blue and you might have thought it was a Gyarados and instead it was a Marill or something? But we didn't have that discussion. We had a bunch of people saying make the game better with absolutely no knowledge of what would go into that. And sure enough, Nintendo ignored them. So if you're comfortable screaming into a void to make absolutely no change, go ahead and keep doing it. But if you really want a developer to listen to you, then you have to be an informed consumer. And that means actually understanding how games work, and not just going, oh, this other game is pretty, so this game should be pretty too. That's a choice that you get to make. I don't give a crap. I enjoyed Scarlet and Violet, and I don't care if you liked it or not. That doesn't affect my enjoyment of the product whatsoever. But if you want to be heard, then you owe it to yourself to inform yourself. And if you push back against that, then your voice just isn't going to be heard.